He was just an ordinary man, sitting at a diner like anyone else. But that night, uniformed officers turned a simple meal into a nightmare. They didn't see a father, a husband, a human being. They saw only the color of his skin. What they never imagined was who would walk through the doors next, and how one shocking truth would turn their power upside down. This isn't just about one man, it's about the moment a system was forced to face itself. It was a quiet evening in a small-town diner, the kind of place where the smell of coffee lingered in the air and the jukebox hummed softly in the corner. Marcus, a middle-aged man with tired eyes and work-worn hands, sat alone at a booth, waiting for his order. To anyone watching, he looked like just another customer winding down after a long day. But beneath that calm exterior was a father who carried both pride and hope for his family, especially his son, who had risen to one of the most trusted positions in the nation. The diner wasn't new to Marcus. He had eaten here countless times. Some staff smiled politely, others barely acknowledged him. But on this night, a group of officers sat near the counter, their voices low but their eyes sharp, watching his every move. The air seemed to shift, heavy with unspoken tension, though Marcus tried to ignore it. He unfolded his napkin, adjusted his silverware, and told himself it was just another meal. Yet there was something in the way those stares lingered, something in the silence between their whispers that hinted at trouble. Marcus had learned long ago how quickly a quiet evening could unravel, how fast suspicion could turn into something worse. He didn't know it yet, but before the night was over, the walls of this diner would witness a cruelty that would not stay hidden, and a truth that would shake the very foundation of those who thought they held all the power. Marcus lifted his cup of water, trying to steady his nerves. The officers' voices grew louder now, their laughter sharp, like it was aimed at him even when no words were spoken directly. One of them leaned back in his chair, boots stretched out across the diner floor as if to mark his territory. Another tapped his badge against the counter rhythmically, eyes fixed on Marcus. The waitress placed a plate of food in front of him, eggs and toast, nothing fancy, but it was comfort after a long shift. Yet before his fork could touch the plate, a chair scraped against the floor. One officer stood, his heavy steps echoing as he approached the booth. "Evening," the officer muttered, though there was nothing polite in his tone. Marcus looked up calmly, giving the man a nod, refusing to show fear. But the silence stretched, filled with tension. Soon, another officer joined, then another, until 3 uniforms loomed over his table. "Problem, gentlemen?" Marcus asked, his voice even, controlled. One officer smirked. "Depends. You got a reason to be here?" The question hung in the air, insult wrapped in authority. Marcus could feel the entire diner watching now, forks frozen in midair, eyes darting between him and the uniforms. He forced a steady breath, unwilling to give them the reaction they wanted. But the officers weren't interested in calm. One reached down, grabbed Marcus's arm, and pulled him roughly from the booth. His fork clattered onto the table. Another officer shoved him toward the counter, his plate of food sliding to the floor, yolk spilling across the tiles. The room gasped. Phones appeared in shaky hands, recording quietly from corners. But no one spoke. Not yet. Marcus stumbled, catching himself against the counter, his dignity the only thing holding him upright. "Why are you doing this?" he asked, but his words were drowned by the sound of laughter. An officer pushed him harder, forcing him down against the counter. "Resisting, huh?" the man sneered, though Marcus hadn't lifted a hand. The diner filled with the sickening crack of his head against wood, the sound louder than the jukebox, louder than the whispers. It wasn't just violence, it was humiliation. The kind designed to strip away humanity while the world watched silently. Marcus's vision blurred, pain surging through his skull. He tasted blood, felt the sting of shame. He thought of his son, his pride, his anchor. He whispered his name under his breath, a small act of survival. The officers didn't notice, or maybe they didn't care. To them, he was invisible except as a target. They dragged him across the floor, their boots thudding in rhythm, their voices mocking. One kicked his fallen plate aside, yolk smearing like a stain on the tiles. But outside the diner's glass windows, movement stirred. A black SUV pulled up, headlights cutting through the darkness. A figure stepped out, broad shoulders, tailored suit, and an air of quiet authority. Marcus didn't see it yet. The officers didn't notice either. But the moment that door swung open, everything they thought they knew about power was about to change. The diner doors swung open with a sharp creak, and for a brief second, the noise inside froze. The officers still had Marcus pinned against the counter, their voices mocking, but the sudden silence of the room pulled their attention. A man stepped inside, tall, sharp in a dark suit, with a presence that carried authority without a word spoken. His eyes swept the scene, the overturned plate, the crowd of silent witnesses, the officers holding his father like a criminal. "Dad?" His voice cut through the air like a blade. The officers turned, confused. One muttered, "This your kid?" with a mocking grin, but that grin faded fast as the man pulled an ID badge from his pocket. The gold seal glimmered under the diner lights. U.S. Secret Service, White House Security Chief. Gasps rippled through the diner. Phones tilted higher, cameras zooming closer. The officers' smirks collapsed into blank stares, their grip loosening on Marcus's arms. "Let him go," the son ordered, his voice firm, steady, carrying the weight of power the uniform suddenly recognized. One officer stammered, We didn't know." "That's the problem," the son interrupted, his tone sharp, unforgiving. "You never know. You never ask. You just assume. And men like my father pay the price." Marcus, bruised but still standing tall, looked at his son with pride burning through the pain. The roles had reversed, the powerless now shielded by undeniable authority, the so-called powerful suddenly small in the presence of truth. The officer's hands twitched, unsure whether to apologize or disappear. The crowd watched, recording every second, their silence now charged with judgment. And in that moment, the entire diner knew. This was bigger than one beating. One night, one man. It was the moment arrogance collided headfirst with justice and lost. The diner was still, the weight of silence pressing harder than the chaos that came before. Marcus straightened slowly, wiping the blood from his lip, while his son stood firmly by his side. The officers, once so loud and fearless, now shuffled nervously, their authority stripped bare in front of flashing cameras and unblinking eyes. Marcus's son didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. His presence, his position, and the badge in his hand were louder than any words. He looked each officer in the eye, one by one, letting the shame sink in. "You thought he was no one," he said evenly, "but tonight, the world will see exactly who you are." The crowd, emboldened now, murmured in agreement. A few shouted, "We saw it all," and "Justice needs to be done." The officers, pale and trembling, backed away, but it was too late. Their faces were already recorded, their cruelty already captured, their arrogance already exposed. Marcus reached for his son's hand, gripping it tightly, not just as a father finding strength, but as a man reclaiming dignity. For years he had carried the weight of silence, but tonight his suffering had witnesses. Tonight, the system's cracks were laid bare for everyone to see. The SUV door opened again, and more security personnel stepped inside the diner, their polished shoes clicking against the floor. The officers lowered their heads, realizing there was no escape from accountability now. When Marcus finally walked out of the diner, supported by his son, the night air felt different. Not lighter, not healed, but charged with the undeniable truth that what had been done in the shadows could no longer stay hidden. Because this wasn't just one story, it was a mirror held up to a nation. And the question it left behind hung heavy. How many more fathers must bleed before change finally begins?